Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Italian and the English Parliament, what they do, what they consist of, what their limits are, the role, etc. So, if we go to a Parliament as a concept, it is the legislative body. It is the place where our representatives sit. Remember, we should have voted for the representatives. They sit in the Parliament and discuss which laws to approve and which ones to reject. So it's got this legislative power. In Italy, you've got the Chamber and the Senate. So you've got two houses of Parliament. The first, why do you have two houses is the first question to answer. Also, England has two houses. We'll look at that later on. Normally, the houses can either represent maybe the regions and then the nations. So one house is more of a representation of the regions, or maybe the states. In America, you've got the Senate, which represents the states and is organised according to the states. Or they can represent different classes. Now this is interesting because that's how it started in Italy and in England. In Italy, you had the king Albertino that decided to preempt any revolution, political revolution like the revolution in France. And in 1847 he gave a statuto, so a kind of constitution, Statuto di Albertino, in which there was a parliament. So that he gave the people a parliament where they could discuss, but that parliament was just for rich men. Initially, the voters and the representatives could only be rich men, so they were kind of like the elite class. But then, as we become more democratic, you have a second house, the lower house we call it, in Italy and in England, where you've got the other classes of people. Now, nowadays we keep these two houses because they do actually represent different characteristics that are very important. The lower house, which is the Chamber of Deputies, represents younger and maybe more innovative, maybe more idealistic and wanting to change the world, full of energy, whereas the Senate are older, maybe with more experience, maybe a moderating force, a bit wiser, a bit more conservative, less radical and wanting to change the world. So you've got these two styles which are very important. It's exactly the same in England. You've got the Commons, the House of Commons, which is the lower house, represents the younger, more ambitious house, and the Lords, which the older and more experienced members play their role. So you've got these two roles, and historically they've both got roots in the different classes, but now they represent different characteristics more than anything. in England or the United Kingdom, the Parliament, the original idea of an assembly for the people was started with the Magna Carta, where the Magna Carta did make the law the highest authority in the land, higher than the king, so the king no longer had absolute control, and this obviously took a little bit of power away from the king and created this idea of an assembly where you can make laws and discuss laws. So it goes back all the way 1215 to the Magna Carta. But actually our Parliament as an institution comes from the unification of Scotland with England and Wales and Ireland at the time. So that's the origins of the English Parliament. So we've got these two bodies, the Chamber and the Senate. We've got the Chamber of Deputies, which has 630 elective deputies. Quite a number. Whereas the Senate has 315, a lot smaller. It's considered a bi-chamber system, bicameral system, which means basically they both serve the same purpose, to authorise laws, to approve laws. So there's no difference. The two chambers meet separately, or they can meet together, we'll talk about in a minute, but they meet separately as organs of the Constitution, and then give their approval. So first a law could go to the Chamber of Deputies, be approved, and then it would have to go through the Senate and be approved as well before it can become law. So both chambers they have exactly the same powers. It's called an egalitarian bi-chamber system. So we've talked about a little bit about the origins. Now, yes, we can see the characteristics of the houses of the different chambers in Italy in the minimum age to vote. So the minimum age to vote for the Chamber of Deputies is 18, whereas in the Senate it's 25. So they're looking for people which are older, a bit more experienced, before they can have their say and be represented. And the minimum age to be elected, so you've got to be 25 to be in the Chamber of Deputies, but in the Senate you must be 40. Obviously, again, they need senators to be older and a bit more experienced. The electoral system changes and can change. Each house must choose their specific, it's a law, an ordinary law for the election system, even though each house chooses their specific rules of the house. The election system can be as they want it. It must be a law. So now so we can say, you've got, instead of 630, you've got 945 people looking at each law. So you can say it's got a deeper analysis, having two institutions. But the big problem is it's much more complex and takes a lot longer to make laws. A state obviously sometimes needs to make laws very quickly. You can't always wait, years for things, proposals to be moderated, then it gets through the deputies but not the Senate, so it's got to be moderated again. You know, it can bounce to and forth between the houses sometimes. And that really slows the system, but also the cost. Think of the cost, just doing, you've got to remember they're more or less the same composition. It might be slightly different, but you know, if a party or coalition of parties win the House of Deputies, normally they win the Senate too. And so normally they always agree, these two houses. So does that justify the cost and the complexity and the length of making a law? Very important to be able to put laws and react quickly sometimes. You can have decrees, but you know, do we want to rely on those? And you know, we've got to have the system working efficiently. Is this efficient? Okay. So that's been questioned a lot. In fact, Renzi tried to change the system, tried to make the Senate not voted for, nominated. The senators must be nominated in some way. But it went to a referendum and it didn't win the referendum. So we've got the old system of you know, being directly elected. If they're directly elected, the Senate will always have full power to stop the law or to approve the law. If it's not directly elected, if Renzi had won, it would be just a body which could moderate, maybe delay laws, like in the Lords in England. They can just delay laws, but they can't stop them definitely forever. You know. Now, so we've got these two chambers. They're both organs of the Constitution with different characteristics, but the two chambers can sit together, and then it becomes another organ of the Constitution. So we can consider them when they're seduti comune, in seduta comune, as an organ of the Constitution, because they have a specific characteristic which is different from the Senate and different from the deputies. But this only can be done according to the constitutional indications. So they can't sit together when they want. Article 55 says il Parlamento si compone della Camera dei Deputati e del Senato della Repubblica. And then it says il Parlamento si riunisce in seduta comune dai membri delle due Camere nei soli casi stabiliti dalla Costituzione. So, you know, there could be this other organ, but only when and we'll look at when the Constitution says there can be. Normally it's not legislative, or it's never legislative, so it's not seduta in comune, or in seduta comune, is not, they're not making laws or deciding on laws. They are electing or judging the President of the Republic. We'll look at the first reason, shall we? So you've got 5 different occasions. Okay, so the first is, we can look at Article 83. It says il Presidente della Repubblica è eletto dal Parlamento in seduta comune dei suoi membri. So to elect the President of the Republic, in Italy he's indirectly elected, so he's not elected by the people but by the Parliament in seduta comune, and that's when they do it. Then it continues, alle elezioni partecipano 3 delegati per ogni regione eletti dal Consiglio regionale in modo che sia assicurata la rappresentanza della minoranza. Got to remember, when we're talking about electing the President of a Republic, we want unity. The President of the Republic represents unity, he's the head of state. So we really need unity. So we want, not just here, it's not just the Parliament in Seduta Comune, but also 3 delegates for each region, so that they can be they can also represent the minority. But also it says la Valle d'Aosta ha un solo delegato. We've got to remember Aosta is a special statuto, so it's a special region where it can have certain independences, autonomies on certain laws, and so also it has a bit less representation in the Parliament and in choosing the President of the Republic. It's a bit more independent, it's got a bit more freedom. So that's one reason. But then 83,3 continues. L'elezione del Presidente della Repubblica ha luogo per scrutinio è sufficiente la maggioranza assoluta. So it's a secret vote. That means that it will be less political, because when it's not a secret vote, you have to follow what your party's instructed and what's the popular ideas in your party. You are exposed to observation. But secretly means people will vote for what they really think, and be a bit more independent from party politics. Maggioranza assoluta means majority, absolute majority. That means if people are absent, they still, it's not simple majority means just the majority of those present. An absolute majority means a majority of those who are members. So even if they're absent, you're still going to get 51% of the vote, including the people that are absent. So it's a bit more difficult to reach absolute majority, because then maybe people are absent, and then you're still going to make up their votes, if you like. So you've got to get 51% of the total membership, not 51% of who's present. It doesn't say there it's a secret vote, but it is a secret vote. Then the second reason is il Presidente della Repubblica non è responsabile degli atti compiuti nell'esercizio delle sue funzioni, tranne per alto tradimento e per attentato alla Costituzione. Okay, so if he betrays, if the President of the Republic, first of all, he's not responsible, like the members of Parliament are not responsible for acts, for what they say in how they express themselves in discussions in Parliament or how they vote. He's not responsible when he acts in his functions for any penal, maybe defamation or something, I don't know. Or maybe he made a mistake and pardoned someone he shouldn't have pardoned, and they killed someone else or something, I don't know. But it says tranne per alto tradimento. So this, for betraying the country, this would be obviously joining in some way against the interests or against the institutions of Italy, maybe with an enemy state or another state, maybe spying or doing something which betrays Italy, the interests of Italy. So, or the constitution. Maybe if he's organising, you know, a way of, you know, helping the Russians. He's trying to help a specific political party because he thinks the Russians will do him a lot of favours or something. So that would be, he's responsible for that. Or attentato alla Costituzione. So this could be going against the Constitution. So even a criminal act could be considered as an attentato alla Costituzione. He's the guarantor of the Constitution. So if in any way he's trying to subvert it in some ways, or even going against it, even criminally, he does something, then he's responsible for that specific act. And in that case, this is where the seduto comune sitting comes into play, because in tale casi è messo in stato di accusa dal Parlamento in seduta comune a maggioranza assoluta dei suoi membri. So, it's only stato di accusa, so they can only accuse him, so they vote on whether he should be accused or not. If they vote he should be accused all together, all the Senate and the Camera dei Deputati vote together, he's accused, then it will go to the Constitutional Court, who will judge, did he violate this Article 90 or not? Did he betray the Constitution or make an attempt against the Constitution? But so this is just to accuse him. But that's a role they have. That's another role they have of sitting in judgment if the president should be made, put on trial or not. I remember Cinque Stelle did threaten Mattarella with this, because Mattarella said that Cinque Stelle can't have their Minister of Economics, because that minister had in fact written a book against the euro, so he didn't want to put at risk Italy's position. Mattarella said that would be damaging to savers, which are protected by the Constitution. And they threatened, you know, they said, Cinque Stelle said, well, we'll bring this up, and this should be, this is an attempt against the Constitution because it's not democratic. But it didn't happen. It was just a lot of noise and anger that they couldn't get their way. So it didn't happen, because in fact he just said, well, I'm protecting savers as the Constitution says. Another article says in the Constitution that savers must be protected, and this was his way of avoiding even talk about crashing out of the euro, and so destabilising the value of the money, which would hurt savers. Okay, so that's another reason.